Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today we are taking a look at the 2023 roster for the Vancouver Titans. They finished the 2022 season with a 5-19 record, minus 33 differential. Pretty big drop off from the 10-seeded Uprising to the 11-seeded Titans in terms of differential. Not a very good look from the Titans last season. Going into 2023, they have a very, very, very new look roster, though in some ways, not entirely. So taking a look at their roster for 2023, you can see it here. They have Aspire, the only player returning from last season. And they have added Punk, Faith, Crimzo, all of whom played with the Boston Uprising last year, and Sugar Free, who is a rookie player, very, very, very famous from his time in NA Contenders back in the day. So, interesting looking roster here. Let's jump in and let's talk about it as we head into the week where we are finally getting Overwatch League back with the Pro-Am coming out. I don't have any plans right now to do any specific pre-Pro-Am content, but I suppose we'll see what happens as we get closer to the actual Pro. But who cares? Let's move in and let's talk about the actual rosters we got here for this team. Let's start with the tank player for this roster, which is Punk. Like I said, he comes over from the Boston Uprising after spending years and years and years trying to basically keep himself from being benched by the Uprising, and the Uprising continually trying to bench him and failing. He finally makes his way over to a different roster, the Vancouver Titans roster, which I think is a very good landing spot for Punk. I like him as a player. I think he showed a very good performance over the past couple years on Boston. He was one of the few kind of bright spots for that roster over the past couple years, so happy that he found a spot where he gets to be kind of the solo tank, or at the very least, the primary tank player for the team. I don't know if they're going to sign another tank player. I wouldn't be surprised if they brought in another tank player just to kind of help round out what he's able to play. Because obviously, he's an off-tank player traditionally, so he's most known for stuff like D.Va, like Zarya, like Sigma. We did see him play Junker Queen last year. I thought he played very, very well, which is a pretty good thing to see from him. So I think he's a really good player to kind of have on this team. But, like I said, I think he is someone that doesn't play everything, right? He's not the most kind of expert player on every single tank hero, but I do think he is the primary starter for this team by and large. I think he's able to kind of adapt to what needs to be played, but I do think that they should probably have someone else just in case, but not in the sense of trying to permabench him, just more so if it's a hard ball meta or a hard Winston meta, or a hard Ryan meta, something like that, where I just feel like they would be better off having somebody to be kind of dedicated to those specific heroes that would kind of help Punk be better on the stuff that he's really, really good at. That's what I'd like to see. But I think that Punk has shown enough to me to think that he is definitely the main tank player for this team. He is the guy that they are going to rely on the most, and I think he's going to do a very good job here as the primary guy in that role. And I think part of what helps is that his support line is also returning from last year's Boston squad with Faith and Crimzo. Now, there was also MCD on that squad last year. He, of course, making the move over to the Dallas Fuel, but Faith and Crimzo both making their way over to the Vancouver Titans. Crimzo, Canadian player, finally getting to play for a Canadian roster. We've all been waiting for it. We've all been waiting for him to get the opportunity to play with either Vancouver or Toronto. And here he finally gets his opportunity. I'm a big Crimzo fan. I think Crimzo's a very, very good flex support player. I think he's maybe not the best Western flex support anymore, but he certainly is up there in the conversation with the likes of Ultraviolet. I think is probably the only other one right now who there's much of a contest with. I thought Khan was good. I think Crimzo has shown to be better than Khan over his consistency. So very, very, very good player in Crimzo. Very happy he found a spot on this Titans roster. I was honestly concerned that he would not find a spot in the Overwatch League, which to me would have been a really unfortunate truth, because I think he's very, very good. And I think he has done quite a good job during his time in the Overwatch League. And having him play alongside Faith, who we played with last year, I think is also very, very nice. Faith, to me, is kind of the weird player on this team. Obviously, he played on, a mixed roster last year, and the year before that, with Boston. And Boston has had kind of a mixed roster for a bit. So he has some of that history. Vancouver has been seemingly kind of high on bringing people in who are essentially just kind of one Korean player. They had Aztec last year. He was the only Korean player on the roster. They had Teru the year before that. So it's something that they have done in the past. So they seemingly have found a way to kind of make it work. I know that their manager before was, I believe Lena is her name. I'm drawing a blank on what her name is. But I think she's Baroy, who's the general manager for this team. I believe his wife is the player manager for this team, and she I think speaks Korean, so I think that obviously helps you as well. But I could be getting this information entirely wrong, so apologies. But I think this is a good kind of group to kind of have here. I like these two players. I like what these two guys have done. I really like what they've been able to kind of show me last year. I thought they were fine last year. I don't think they were by any means the best support line in the league. I think they're a solid support line. I think it helps to elevate the team when you have a kind of a strong kind of core to your roster that you keep together. Even if you move them over to a new team, they're familiar with the coach, they're familiar with the general manager, and they're familiar with each other. So you're not really creating or having to create all of the same synergy from the beginning. You kind of have a bunch of that synergy, and you just kind of are building upon that with your team. I think another spot on this roster, they only have 5 players right now, so they have to have at least one more player before the season starts. I'm curious to kind of see what they go with. If they go with another tank, if they go with another damage player, another support player, I don't know. I think this is a team that I don't expect to excel in double flex support metas with Faith and Crimzo. I think that they're two players that, you put them on their comfort roles, they'll be fine. I don't really expect them, like I said, to be able to play everything. I definitely don't expect them to be an incredibly strong double flex team. And so that's my kind of biggest concern with this team, is the fact that I really don't buy into their overall flexibility on the support role, though in their best on their best heroes, I do think they'll be fine. But like we saw last year, Crimzo and Faith had MCD alongside them. So in double flex support metas, you had Crimzo and MCD, and you didn't put Faith in there. So definitely a point of concern for me. I think the Pro-Am, there's a very real possibility of a double flex meta. I don't know exactly what it is. I have not been looking at the leaked scrims. I have not had the time to look at all of the leaked scrims. I don't know exactly what people are playing, but I've heard Kiriko Ana is something that's been getting some play time. So if that were a thing with this team, I would definitely be concerned, because I don't think this team really kind of sells me on double flex support based on what we've seen so far. But I suppose we will see what happens with this team kind of when stuff goes on. Finally, with this roster, of course, we have the damage duo of Aspire and Sugar Free. Now, last year's Boston roster, where we had Punk, Faith, Crimzo, and Valentine and Victoria as kind of the main part of the roster, I thought that Boston roster had some potential, and I thought that they were held back by Valentine and Victoria. I thought they were not a good damage duo. I thought they really held that team quite a bit. They did not impress me. I thought they were one of the weakest, if not the weakest, DPS duos in the league. They did nothing for me. Truly, well and truly, they did nothing for me. So, I like Aspire Sugar Free as a duo. I think it's a very, very strong duo. I think it's an improvement over what you had with last year's Boston roster. I think this is a much better looking squad. I think these are two players that just, to me, I buy into them more. I think they just have shown me a lot, right? Aspire, to me, one of my favorite players over the past couple seasons. Just his play style is very, very good. I think he understands the game at a very high level. He's very mechanically good. Obviously, we saw him on American Tornado back in the day, right? He was on a very, very good contenders roster. He had a very, great run there. Comes the Overwatch League. Played well for Toronto. Played well for Vancouver last year. So I think he's a really strong piece to kind of build your damage around. You throw in Sugar Free, someone who, of course, did spend some time playing Valorant. He did kind of retire from Overwatch for a bit and then go to Valorant. A lot of that, I think, probably just comes down to the fact that I don't really think he, as someone who's very, very young, I think he knew he didn't really have a chance to join the team or join an Overwatch League team anytime soon. So I think he kind of viewed it as there's no real reason to expect him to be kind of competing where he can't. So we went to Valorant where he could actually compete. So he comes back. He did spend a little bit of time with Fusion University back in 2021 when they were kind of in that visa period where they didn't have all of their Western players with the team. So Sugar Free's a good player. He's a flex DPS player, right? You're going to get your Genjis, your Echoes, stuff like that out of him. I think he'll probably play the majority of Tracer for this team in kind of Tracer Sojourn or Tracer Widow type of metas. Aspire will be their hitscan player. But in stuff like Tracer Genji metas, I definitely expect Aspire to pick up the Tracer for that, Sugar Free to be the Genji for that. So I like this duo. I don't think they're the most flexible in the league. I think there are definitely some holes. Potentially, like I said, double hit scan to me is kind of the big area that I think they won't excel. But I think that this is a solid duo, all things considered. I think these are both, these are two very good damage dealers, two players that I'm very excited to see kind of play together. And I think that they will be a better fit for this roster than what you had with Boston last year with Valentine and Victoria. And that's very, very important to note, right? Most of this Titans roster is a holdover from last year's Boston squad, including the head coach being Askoft and Baroy being one of the general managers or the general manager for this team, kind of came over last year during the season. So he built at least some of that Uprising roster last year and has built this Titans roster this year, basically with a bunch of the guys he knows from Boston. So it's very important to kind of look at the Boston team last year and compare it to this year and say, is this roster better than that Boston roster was? And I think the answer is yes. I genuinely believe that Aspire and Sugar Free is a stronger, better DPS duo with higher highs than Valentine and Victoria were last year for Boston. I thought Valentine and Victoria did not play well. I thought they held back this roster more often than not. And I think that this team overall is stronger, is better, and I think we'll have more kind of potential in terms of just play among those DPS heroes. However, I don't think this team, in its current 5-man spot, is really all that capable of going very far. I think that there are clear and obvious holes in this roster. Like I said, they obviously have to sign at least one more player. I honestly, generally speaking, I say that tank is where you should get your second player. I don't think that's the case with this roster. I think that they're better off either getting another support player or another damage player before they get another tank player. Punk, to me, has proven to be a very capable, very reliable player. And I think that his ability to kind of play enough of the roster at a high enough level to be able to compete with other teams is not something to ignore. But I think this team has, a double flex meta to me is a really bad sign for this team. I don't think they can compete in a double flex meta. I think they would fall behind because I don't think that Faith's flex support is at a level that makes me think that they have what it takes to compete in a double flex meta. And then in damage, I would like to see them have another piece on there just to kind of round out what they can play. Because I think they have issues, but I do think overall this is a solid kind of core for a roster. I don't think this is a fully fledged roster in its current state. One more player I don't think is enough to get them to that point. So I would like to see at least 2 more additions before this team, I think, really has the potential to be a somewhat competitive team in kind of competing with a lot of the other teams around them. Because right now, as things stand, they sit in a tier with teams like Washington, New York, Vegas, LA Valiant. I think they could compete with the likes of Florida. They could compete with the likes of London. But I think those two teams are better than they are. But to me, they're kind of in that tier of teams, right? Where they do not look like the worst roster in this region by any means. I think that they have enough talent to find quite a bit of success. And I think that improving this DPS duo from last year's Boston squad will be a noticeable increase in terms of their overall level of play. But I don't think it's enough to, in my opinion, propel them to be in that kind of upper echelon or even like upper middle pack of the league, or Western region specifically. So I think they're okay. I think they're a decent team. I think they have some potential. I think they have specific areas where I feel like they'll be pretty good. Like, I think if you get them in a meta where you can put Sugar Free on Genji, you can put Aspire on Tracer, those two will pop off. You can get Punk on his comfort roles, whether it be Junker Queen, whether it be Diva. I think this team will look very, very good. And if you can get the kind of Lucio Zen or Lucio Ana type of meta, yeah, this team will look really, really good in situations like that. Maybe not best in the league, but they will look good. They will be able to compete with a lot of teams. But they don't have the flexibility for me to think that they are capable of really punching consistently with the heaviest weight teams. And so for me, I think that they are good, not great. And I think that they have a long road ahead of them if they don't make some smart additions to this roster. We're getting to that point, of course, as we get closer to the season where we're talking about some of the weaker level teams. So there is a little bit more negativity, I think, surrounding some of these bottom tier rosters from last season. Whether or not they're able to bring in a new roster that can compete significantly greater than they did last season, we'll see. But right now, I do think this Vancouver roster is in a better spot than it was last year. So I feel overall pretty excited to see where this roster goes. That's going to be it for today. Those are all my thoughts on this Titans roster. Let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on the Titans roster. And if you want more videos like this in the future, consider liking and subscribing, as your support does help out a ton with the channel. But that is going to be all for me for today. Thank you all once again. I hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.